Welcome to the Rich Mind Podcast.
This is going to be fun, man. We're going to dive into, I kind of teased it out at the end of the last episode, a subject that I don't think it's a lot of focus in terms of folks out there in the entrepreneur world. They're trying to achieve more. They're trying to go get more. They're trying to have more, be more, all of the things that you hear from the normal folks. And I don't think that a lot of times people will give this one subject enough focus. And I'll maybe just even give a little bit more color on top of that. So I've recently just dove back into the Retire Young, Retire Rich book by Robert Kiyosaki. Highly recommend you get that book. That was the book that got me on this journey. That's the reason why we're even having this discussion today. And in there, one of the things that his rich dad told him, which is why I wanted to have a discussion today, that the subject of leverage was so important in terms of success. So yeah, just let me leave it there. What are your thoughts, Greg? Leverage. Just, let's have a discussion back and forth about the importance of leverage, what it is, how people can use it, and let's see how we've incorporated it into our own lives to achieve the things that we've done so far. Any thoughts?
Yeah, so leverage is, obviously there's a lot of different ways that you can leverage other things, other people's time experiences. We're going to go through them all. So each one is kind of unique in its own way, but when you combine them, that's taking leverage to like another level. And yeah, I totally agree with you. Robert Kiyosaki, he's one of the foundations of my library and how I started as well. So, that's more on the financial side, but I think we're going to dive into some other things that aren't necessarily financial that people are going to really love about this episode.
Yeah, so that's where I think that's the focus piece that I wanted to bring up front, is that I think a lot of times people just focus on the financial piece. When they think of debt, they think of that as being leverage. And that's correct. I'm not saying that isn't correct, but I don't think that they think of the other forms of leverage that are going on every day, that if they were to use them to their advantage, building a business, building a community, building whatever their dream life is, right? Building this quote unquote success that they want, not in comparison to anybody else's, right? It's just a matter of if you can incorporate enough leverage in your life from a positive standpoint. Maybe that's another thing too we can talk about. I think that sometimes you hear the word leverage, and in my mind sometimes goes to thinking that's a negative term, like you're trying to get something from somebody else, when in terms, the way we want to present it today is that it's a tool that can be used to gain more in a relatively shorter period of time, but then obviously with the help of others. Yeah, it's just a different way of looking at it versus, like I said, I think what most people think of just money or finances or debt or something like that. So yeah, I can't wait to dive into the different types of leverage that people can incorporate as well.
Yeah, I'd agree. And the biggest word that you said there was tool, right? It's a tool. It's another tool in your tool belt. How you want to use it, that's up to you. And we're going to go through probably 4 or 5 or 6 examples of leverage, how we see them. So yeah, it's going to be real fun, and, take these tools and use them as you want.
So Rich Dad, right? Robert Kiyosaki, he talks about OPM. He was the first one I've ever heard talk about, using OP and then whatever the leverage piece is at the very end, right? OP is other people's, and then M would be for money, right? That's a form of leverage. What are some others that come to mind as far as OP? What? Can you think of anything else?
Other people's time.
Yes.
I think that's a big one. And then the other one that comes to mind is other people's failures and experiences.
So, okay, you brought that up. We had a little bit of a pre-call, and you brought that up, and I love that. I honestly had not really thought of it in that way. Tell me more about that. Tell me more where that came from, where your thoughts are on that specific one there, the other people's knowledge and wisdom and that type of thing.
Yeah, so I don't know where I pulled that from. It's somewhere in my personal development journey. But, other people's failures, let's start there. If you're starting, let's say, a podcast, and you're talking to a buddy who started a podcast and they're super successful at, their podcasting. If you ask them questions, say, hey, what did you do in the beginning that absolutely didn't work, that you would never do again? You would tell me not to do. That's a great question to ask, because if I'm just doing this on my own, I'm thinking this through logically in my head without any other input, I might think, doing X, Y, and Z is the best thing for my podcast. Where this person who has that experience said, no, you don't want to do that. It doesn't work. You're going to waste a lot of time and money. And just having that conversation, having that person in your life is going to save you time, money, frustration, self-doubt, that, it could go down that route. So, learning from other people's failures, whether you're having a conversation with them, whether you're reading about it in a book or hearing it on a podcast, because people will share their failures all the time, and entrepreneurial world, we do have failures, and it's part of success. It's
all
on
the time.
It's on the same
Right.
side of that coin of success. So that's why I like other people's failures, and kind of goes along with their experiences too. They'll obviously tell you what is working, what to do, what not to do. But yeah, that's probably one of my favorite ones is other people's failures and experiences.
That ties right back into our peak framework, the knowledge piece, right? That's the wisdom of others. They can be deceased. I mean, they don't have to necessarily be with us. I listen to Jim Rohn, Earl Nightingale, different folks like that, right? Napoleon Hill, and it's wisdom. And you can listen to their stories, biographies of other folks, right? Those are also great resources to hear kind of their struggles along with their successes. Steve Jobs is a great example, in my opinion, right? Whether or not you agree with who he was as a human, that's up for debate. But as far as the impact that he's had on society with the little rectangle things that we carry around everywhere, I mean, we're even talking into this little computer, right? I mean, if it wasn't for him, more than likely we would not be doing that, at least not in this way. And and so when I'm talking about I'm talking about still with Steve, is that he had all kinds of forms of leverage within his life. So maybe let's dive into those a little bit deeper. You named off a lot of them, right? We can find the knowledge and wisdom from others that have had experiences. Let's go into like other people's time. So maybe before we go into that, so one thing I heard this a long time ago, and maybe this just be a little nugget for you listening today, folks, that maybe you can just kind of sit with this for a little bit, is that middle class or less wealthy folks focus on buying things, whereas rich, wealthy individuals focus on buying time. Have you ever heard that?
Yep. Yeah, I've heard that concept, and it rings true.
So maybe let's use that as the framework as far as discussing the OPT portion of if you want to become successful and why that's so important.
Yeah. So other people's time is a huge one to leverage, or lever to pull, I should say, because we all have 24 hours in a day, right? And sometimes you look at people and you say, how did they get so much done in 24 hours and they're still sleeping 17 hours a day? But it seems like they are just doing this and that, and this one's going up, and they're this business, and they're leveraging other people's time, right? And the best example that I can come up with is, maybe having an assistant or a virtual assistant to do some things that, you don't want to do, or you don't even necessarily know how to do. And that would be, an example of that would be like scrubbing the internet for some data that you need to make a decision to buy a piece of real estate or not. If you can hire somebody to pull that data for you, that means that they're working at the same time that you're doing something else. So you're having two things done at the exact same second. That's how you leverage other people's time.
And it's not you're taking advantage of the other person. They're getting compensated for that time.
Of course.
And they are in agreement to that compensation, right? So I think, when I put thoughts out there, folks like this, it's almost like this is just kind of how I see it. And that's where the back and forth with Greg, it even kind of helps me get some of my ideas out. But when I was first starting out for myself, I thought that I just needed to figure it out all on my own. I just needed to go out, grind. That's kind of how I was brought up to be. I watched that. I was kind of modeled that in my own home. My dad had all kinds of ideas, but he struggled with the idea of allowing someone to help him get it done. I'll be honest with you, I struggled. So this is where even this collaboration you and I are having with the podcast, there are some things that you're trying to take off and help me with taking off my plate that it's like, I've been doing that now for almost 2 years. It's a little strange to kind of give over some of those things, but I know that I can't grow. I can't become the Rich Mind. Let's even take me out of it, right? Because it's not about me. The Rich Mind brand and the Rich Mind podcast can't grow if I don't start releasing some of those things. And if I don't get part of the other people's time, which is right now, it's with you helping me. At some point, we might bring on some help with some editing and some media marketing, that right, at some point. But yeah, getting over the idea of thinking that you have to do it all by yourself, that's been tough. And so when I heard that wealthy folks, they focus on buying time. And that's what they mean, is that they hire somebody to do those low-level activities. And I don't mean that they're low value. They are super valuable, but they're not the best use of that wealthy individual's time. And so that they can go out and sell, communicate. I would say even just like with the podcast, recording content is probably the most valuable thing that you and I could do. Would you probably agree with that? But if we're busy creating websites, if we're busy creating social media, if we're busy editing, which we are currently right now, which we're going to work on that. But the point is that if we can incorporate a lot of those buying our time to create more content, we're going to add more value, which is then going to be that snowball to get us to that perceived success that we're looking for.
Yeah, and I think the key word you said there was growth, because I know a lot of people do have that lone wolf syndrome, and some businesses it's 100% fine to be the lone wolf, but a lot of businesses, especially like a podcast, there's so many moving parts that you're going to limit your success, right? Like let's say you're at a 10 out of 10 if you're doing a lone wolf, but if you bring on a partner or you hire somebody out to do the editing or outsource some of those things, you could take that 10 out of 10 and you can increase that scale to 100. Now you're like, all right, now I'm a 70 out of 100. So you really just raise the ceiling of your potential. So I really love that word growth, because growth is, what we're here to talk about on this podcast.
It's exponential. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = 100, because it's 100% return on that growth. That took me a long time. And I'm not saying that I've got it figured out yet, because I'm still trying to work into that. But that was a mindset shift that I've had to work on within myself, which is why I wanted to definitely bring up this subject of leverage here today, because without it, folks, you cannot. I've learned from trial and error of just doing it, grinding, doing, being burnt out, giving up. Persistence kind of comes into that as well, because you'll just burn out. You just won't want to do it anymore. That's been super big. So I'm glad you picked up on that piece of growth, because you're right. That's exactly right. That's awesome. So what's another? We talked about time. Is there another one that comes to mind?
Well, I know the one that you want to talk about is probably systems and processes. So I was going to ask you, how have you leveraged systems and processes? What are your thoughts around it? Because this is more your area than mine. So have at it.
I love it. I love it how you just kind of set that up there. That this is something that was all about me. So here's what I will say is that even though I consider myself kind of the lone wolf, I'm not really good at asking humans or getting humans to help me on my team. I feel like I'm pretty good at leveraging systems. So softwares. AI right now is huge. I know there's a lot of people right now that are scrambling, worried that AI is going to come for their jobs or for their whatever, their livelihoods. But for a person like me, my goodness, I can leverage those tools because I'm using leverage those systems, leverage even for the podcast. So we're currently on a system called riverside.fm. Head over to richmind.co. I've got a great write-up about riverside.fm if you're interested in creating a podcast. It's a fantastic tool. This thing does everything, and it's relatively inexpensive price point. I don't want to say it's free. There is a free option, but if you wanted to do all the different things, right, it's for a relatively small price. You can get it to do certain things. And so once again, for a solopreneur, basically trying to build a team and bring on more of a team, it's a great tool to get started, to make you feel and do more things in a relatively short period of time. Back in the day, and when I say back in the day, back when I was working on my Your Focused Vision idea, I was doing it all by myself. But this was prior to anything that was like it is today, right? I was trying to figure out lights and recording and uploading. When YouTube was just getting started, it was tough. It was hard because the systems weren't in place. The software wasn't in place like it is today. Or even if it was way out of my price point. I couldn't afford thousands of dollars a month or even hundreds of dollars a month to do what it was requiring to bring my ideas to life. So once again, systems. AI. I encourage people all the time. I'm encouraging my kids all the time. Jump on there. Most of it's free. Most. Might not have all the bells and whistles available to you, but you can jump on there and start asking it questions to help you brainstorm ideas for whatever's coming to mind. Whether you want to build something, if you're looking to become an entrepreneur, you've got to get your ideas out to the marketplace. And a great place to test those ideas is to plug them into an AI tool and just have it give you some feedback. And then you can go out there and test. So yes, you're right. I'm super passionate about the idea. I'm going to try to bring it, wind me back up, Greg, get me to calm back down. But yeah, it's the idea of systems. I feel like I'm not a master at it by any means, but I feel like I've done pretty good at becoming, this person of being by myself, right? But then obviously trying to project myself out there into the world by using this leverage of these systems for sure.
Yeah. And the one thing I like about AI is you can actually ask AI to create a system and process for your business. Like there's nothing like it. I mean, even 5 years ago, it would be if you're starting a business, you would have to read a book or listen to a podcast or ask somebody who's in the business. Now with AI, you can use that as another tool. I'm not saying don't talk to people and read books and everything, but you can hop on AI. And I do it all the time for brainstorming, for frameworks, for just all these things. And it might not give you 100%, but it'll give you, oh, that's a great idea. I didn't even think about that. Let me pull that one out and, incorporate that into the other framework that I'm currently writing down or whatever that looks like. So AI is, I don't know how we live without it, but it is such a great tool. And I use it literally every day. And it's just amazing.
So just even the internet, I mean, I can remember pre-internet, and you talk about a tool that you can leverage. A lot of folks have made a lot of money, built big businesses just from the leverage of using the internet. So, but same thing with AI. I think it's so early in its infancy as far as how it can be used. There are new tools being discovered all the time. There's a gentleman called, his name is Matt Wolf. He's on YouTube. We'll put maybe a link to his YouTube channel. Every week he goes through and shares the newest updates and the newest things that are coming on in the AI space. And I try to catch it. I don't catch it every week, but I try to catch it whenever I can, just because I'm fascinated by it. It's so interesting how quickly it's happening that if you can kind of just stay, you don't have to be at the front of the line. You don't have to understand every single tool, why it does this and why it does that. But at the same time, if you can kind of keep your ear to the ground, just kind of get an idea of what you can use, how you can use it, that form of leverage in the future, I think is crucial. So that's what I try to do. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. You're right. Other people's systems. Any other things come to mind as far as leverage that people can use?
Yeah, I think the other one we're going to talk about, I think this is a no-brainer for this podcast, is going to be other people's money. And I know, coming from the Rich Dad, Robert Kiyosaki framework that we both do, that obviously means usually mortgages. There's other ways to use other people's money, but I think for the most part, we'll kind of dive into that mortgage conversation. What do you think?
So once again, going back to what I was brought up to believe and think, that's where we just want to challenge you with your own thoughts. And if what we're talking about here today is pushing up a little bit of your comfort zone, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Hopefully you can work through that through your personal development journey and try to come out the other side with some just different perspective. But yes, other people's money was something that I was brought up to believe that was bad, meaning you didn't do that. You saved every penny, or you saved up to buy a certain thing. It wasn't that bad debt was used a lot in my own life growing up. Maybe we should caveat and maybe just talk about that for a second too, as far as the difference between the good debt and the bad debt, because you can use other people's money in forms of credit cards and get yourself in trouble, versus you can use that same source of income or same source of currency, dollars, and use it to put money in your pocket. Do you fall into that category, thinking that money, as far as good debt versus bad debt, as far as how Robert teaches that?
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that I kind of, I took to pretty quickly, especially in my real estate career, because in the beginning, I didn't have, this was probably back in 2010 when I started investing in real estate. So prices are a lot lower than they are now. But for example, when I was living back in Phoenix, I didn't have $100,000 to buy my first house, but I had $20,000. So that's where the mortgage came in and the leverage came in. And this was my primary, not even a rental. But I thought, okay, this makes sense. I'm going to borrow from the bank and it'll pay them, I think it was 4%, which was crazy. It was crazy low, but it made sense because it was either come up with another $80,000, which I just didn't have. I could have waited 3 or 4 years until I had that $100,000, but that's a lot of time wasted talking about, time here on this podcast. So yeah, so I use other people's money. I got that mortgage, and then I realized I can do that for rentals as well. And that's where it started to really take off and snowball. But yeah, that's where OPM really, really hit me in my life.
Love that. So towards the end of 2024, had a series or a couple of episodes with Gary Pinkerton. Would encourage you to go back and look for Gary Pinkerton in the episodes on the Rich Mind podcast. And we talked about using leverage of life insurance, whole life insurance as leverage. So one term that it took me a while to figure out was the term collateral, and how you can use collateral So maybe we should describe what collateral is, and then maybe how we can use it as a form of leverage to then, whether we're investing in something, whether we're building a business, whether we're buying real estate, whether it's our own personal residence. I've got a little bit of a story, a little bit maybe of how I've used collateral to buy my income properties. Any ideas? Just the term collateral, what that has meant to you. Where did you learn that from? Was that something you were brought up with, or was that something you had to discover on your own?
So that was something I discovered on my own.
Me too.
Yeah. So it's kind of like in that rich dad realm because, my family, my dad was very conservative. He didn't have a mortgage on the house that we grew up in. So he was
not at all.
Wow. But also thinking back to it, he bought that house in 1980, and I believe interest rates back then were in like the high teens or mid teens, and savings accounts, I think, were a lot higher as well. So saving money, if you're a high income earner, saving money, maybe not having a mortgage, it might have made sense back in the 80s just because of those numbers. Because if you're paying 17% on a mortgage, that can really hurt. I know a lot of people did it back in the 80s. I was born in 80, so I don't really, have that knowledge. It also kind of depends on the time frame you're talking about. And for me, it was 2010. That's when I got started. So savings was a lot lower, interest rates were a lot lower, and then borrowing with that collateral, like we're talking about, really made sense. And for me, the collateral is, it's real estate. It's the physical house that we're buying, the building that we're buying. And, if I don't make my mortgage payments, then the bank is going to take that collateral from me. So that's what, how collateral kind of entered my world anyway.
Yeah, same here. It was something I discovered on my own. I don't think up until when I started down on this journey myself, right, from my financial education, I don't think collateral was ever even discussed in my entire life, to be honest with you, that I can remember anyways. And even if it was, I didn't understand it to the point where I try to do that today. So that, we're kind of, stuck on this little point, folks. But I think that if you can kind of get the concept of these ideas, that's where you can kind of shift your mindset, shift your perspective of how to go about, your day-to-day activities to try to, there again, increase some of this success, this quote unquote success that we talked about, whether it's time freedom, whether you're trying to build wealth, whatever it is that is what you're trying to do for yourself. But collateral is something of value that usually it's a bank institution. Within Gary's podcast, we talked about being a whole life insurance company will give you money for, but they're holding that physical thing, whether it's your home, whether it's a whole life policy, as collateral, meaning it has value, and they'll give you a certain amount up to, 70%, 80% of what that value is, that you can take those funds and then use them really however you want. He talked about the episode Gary did about you can really invest in whatever you want. We want to make sure you get educated. I made a point of that, and I want to make a point that here today. You need to get educated in what you're going to invest in. You can't just take it and put it in places that is bad, right? Good debt versus bad debt. So good debt puts money in your pocket. Bad debt takes money from your pocket. So you can't go out and just buy stuff. You've got to buy income streams. So once again, we talked about other people's time. You're going to be buying time. You're going to be using other people's resources, other people's systems. But yeah, the collateral piece is super crucial. So I actually tested this out when I was learning. Got a home equity line of credit on my home. And I used my home as collateral to the bank. They gave me an extra amount that it was up to, that it was worth. But that's what I used to actually begin buying. You talked about having, the down payment. I was like, yeah, I knew it was a good investment because of my education. I was confident with the team. I was confident with everything else like that. And so I actually leveraged that investment property 100%. Now, I'm not recommending that you do that, folks. You need to get educated. We are not financial advisors. We are not lawyers. We are not any of those things. We are just two guys talking about our own personal experiences. But the idea, though, is I just want to understand that I used that collateral, which the collateral at that moment was my home. I leveraged it to a bank, and they gave me a certain amount of credit. I used that credit then to buy investment property, which luckily for me, because of my education, turned out to be a good investment. It could have easily been a bad investment. And I would have learned the hard way that wasn't a good idea, because success, once again, even in this financial world, it's not a straight line, right? Investments go sideways all the time. And that's where you just have to do your best, to do your due diligence. Maybe that's another term at some point, maybe put a thought into that, right? We can go down that road as far as what that even means. But just wanted to introduce the idea of leverage today. Collateral was another big word, big term that I think that if you kind of just get your head wrapped around some of these concepts, dive into the resources that we're sharing, whether it's books, other podcasts, you can grab different resources even that we have offered here on richmind.co. We're going to have different resources for you as well. Try to increase that financial education, but don't forget that the personal development piece goes right along there with that as well. So yeah, any more thoughts on this idea of leverage before I think we're kind of probably start bringing this one in for a landing today?
Yeah, so the last thing that you mentioned kind of sparked something in my mind, and I think it's a conversation for a whole nother podcast and topic, but that is using arbitrage, because that's kind of what you were mentioning, pulling from your home equity line of credit. Obviously, you had to pay them a certain amount, and then you went out to the marketplace and got a higher amount, so it didn't cost you anything. That's where you were making your money, and that's what's called arbitrage between the amount that you're paying and the amount that you're receiving. But I think we'll save that for another episode, because that is going to be a longer conversation. I didn't want to cut you off,
but I didn't want you to go too far into that. Yeah, You're right. Let's use that. So folks, I didn't have anything lined up, the idea for the next episode. And there you go. You just heard it right there from Greg's mouth. We're going to talk about arbitrage, what that even means. So once again, that was something that I've never heard of that before prior to my own education. Once again, going to that peak framework, we're going to be self-education. You've got to get yourself self-educated, things you're not going to learn. We just had in the previous episode, we talked about useless college degrees. You're not going to hear this in college. At least I didn't. I was there twice. I mentioned I was there twice. I dropped out twice, and I'd never heard this before. And, Greg, you can speak. You've got the college degrees. Did you ever talk about leverage and collateral and arbitrage in college?
No, I can't say those terms came up. I wish they did, but they didn't.
I wish they did, but that's why we're happy to bring them up to you today, folks. And that's why this is so much fun for us. Hopefully you're getting a lot of value out of it as well. So yes, next time, that's the teaser. Jonas back. We're going to dive into the subject of arbitrage, what that is, why that's important, why you need to look for arbitrage opportunities in every aspect of your life, because they're out there. And you just have to be aware of them. And that'll be a lot of fun. That's a great subject, man. Glad you brought that up. Any thoughts before, like I said, I know that was a great final thought. Is there anything else you want to add before we bring this in for a close today?
No, I think we kind of covered a lot here. So, there's a lot of different ways to use leverage, and just get out there and do it. I mean, take action, right? Take that inspired action like we're talking about.
Yes, take that inspired action, folks. Start with the self-education. One great resource that I've mentioned on the podcast before, I actually have it in my background if you're watching this on video, is the cash flow board game from the Rich Dad Company. That would be a great resource it's an investment in the game, and it's just a board game. And you learn some of these different terminologies. You learn to put some of this leverage into your own life. And because it's a game, you can't lose. You might lose the game, but you're not going to lose, real things. So that's a lot of fun as well. I would highly recommend you go out and grab a cash flow board game. There actually is an online version as well. You can just play it online. I think, Greg, you told me that you've played it online, and it's just a great resource. So anyways, folks, appreciate you being here. If you wouldn't mind, share this episode or the Rich Mind podcast in general with your family and friends. Greg and I would definitely appreciate that. We're trying to grow the community of the Rich Mind. You can head over to richmind.co. We've got great resources over there as well. Grab your free 5-step report. Grab that and start devouring that. Work on both your personal development, financial education. We talked about leverage. We talked about collateral today. Those are big concepts. We'll talk about arbitrage next time. That'll be a lot of fun as well. But help us spread the message. If you wouldn't mind going to your podcast platform of choice and leave us a review, we would love that as well. You can always email us at info@richmind.co with any questions that you might have, and we'd be more than happy to try to answer those for you as well. So go out there, have a fantastic day. We appreciate your time and attention, and we'll be back with some discussion about arbitrage next time. It'd be a lot of fun. Have a great day. We'll talk then. Bye now.
Thank you for joining us today on the Rich Mind Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and share it with someone you know. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Rich Mind Podcast on your favorite platform and never miss an episode. Want to dive deeper into transforming your financial mindset? Visit our website to download your free 5-step guide titled From Dead-End Job to Entrepreneurial Freedom, designed to help you conquer your fears and start on your entrepreneurial path with confidence. One last thing, Don't ever forget that your mind is the first place where wealth is created. Keep dreaming big, take action, and together, let's build wealth, a legacy, and a life we love. Until next time.